current affairs, facts and opinion, their future in our hands. Markets, globalist technocrats versus the people. A line in the sand. The McIntyre Report.
And welcome back, folks, to McIntyre Report, Australian National Review. Follow our 24-hour news headlines, ANR.news. Big show coming up just after this. But today's episode, I want to talk to you more about some real-life examples of people that are relocating out of the West. It's becoming such a big trend. I've talked about this for some time. I myself left Australia, a first world nation, to move to what was a third world nation, Indonesia and Bali. And after a lot of detailed research of traveling the world to find out what was the best expat type country to move to. And certainly this is an increasing question. More and more people of our viewers and others are wanting to know, should I consider relocating myself, at least some of my assets and money, out of the West? Because even if people fully don't understand geopolitics to the level that we in the industry may, from our relentless study of geopolitics and how that shapes the world, and for myself, my background, a predictor of financial trends, that all comes ability to understand geopolitics, to predict the rise of Bitcoin when it was less than $100, and tell my investor clients to buy it back then and to sell when it was about 120,000 US. Go into US property at the bottom of the market in 2010. That was a call that I made publicly as well to my investor clients, and that turned out to be a very, very good thing. And of course, buying Australian real estate for the last 2.5 decades has made my clients most of the 10 billion collectively they've now earned in the last 2.5 decades. So understanding geopolitics is very critical. But even if people don't intuitively know there's something going wrong in the world ever since this COVID pandemic, which you believe is like about 5 years ago, a bit more, since that nonsense all started. But people know things aren't quite right. Leading up to GFC also, there was a major correction which affected most of the world. Australia was very lucky at that time, but many believe there's another economic crash coming. I would put it at a 50% chance in the next 24 months. There's also World War III coming. There's probably a good 50% chance of that occurring in the next 24 months. So a lot of uncertainty leads to a lot of unsettled anxiousness and people going, what's the future going to look like if I remain in the West? Versus if I consider having a plan B, maybe relocating to another country, what country would I move to? Would I move part-time or full-time, or just have a backup, a home there? And where would that be? Would it be close to where I reside now, a neighboring nation, similar time zone, culture we're comfortable, familiar with, or would it be completely on the other side of the world? These are all questions people have to ask, but some have asked those questions, made a decision, and left the West, and has their life become better? I'm joined today by Justin Dallas. Welcome, Justin, to the McIntyre Report. I know you're an avid property investor like myself, but tell me a little bit about your story, because you're someone that's left America. You left some time ago. You made a decision to look at going, well, I can see things happening, and I want to make it a life-changing decision and relocate. Tell us a little bit about that. How did you? What were you doing back in America before you made that decision? What led you to making that decision, and then ultimately, what led you to choosing Indonesia?
Well, hey, Jamie, just want to say thanks for having me on here today. And ultimately, it was actually the 2008 real estate crash that changed everything for me. It was an eye-opener, and I realized how leveraged the economy was. And I said, I'm looking for an unleveraged economy. And that's when I started looking into Southeast Asia. And lucky enough, was invited on a vacation to Bali to join a family at the time, and fell in love with it, and saw the opportunity of living a more simplistic lifestyle and not being so caught up in the rat race, as I call it in America.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I remember that time, at 2008, the global financial crash, which did certainly help or hurt America a lot, and that contagion was spread globally around the world with globalized markets. And obviously the property market at that time, as you would have known, was highly leveraged. So everyone was becoming, you kind of know when taxi drivers becoming property investors, it might be time to get out of the property market, or when taxi drivers are giving you stock market tips, it might be time to get out of the stock market. That's often a Warren Buffett type rule, but it wasn't insanely leveraged. Australia was fortunate after GFC, thanks to China, kind of bailed Australia out. It didn't affect Australia as bad as many people would have thought. But I remember buying a lot of property shortly after that. 2010, we went with a heap of us from Australia to buy up basically homes for 30, 40, 50,000 on the streets of Phoenix in particular, that had been worth 250, 300,000 before. And strangely, Americans were going into a lot of debt to buy them at 300,000. But after the crash, they wouldn't buy them for 50,000. And we're scratching our head going, I don't get this. The people are scared to buy it now, but they're happy to buy it at 300. They should be jumping all over them at 50 and not touching them at 300. But, the psyche of most people. But what made you to choose, I guess, Bali, because you went there on a holiday? How you found relocating? Was it difficult, or you found it, quite easy? Are you glad you moved?
I mean, for me, I traveled the world young, fortunately, as an American, which is not typical. And so for me, it was quite easy to pack my bags and sell everything and leave, especially after the 2008 real estate crash. But when I was on holiday here, I just realized that in a non-leveraged economy, how you can live and survive. And okay, if there was something like this in the future, then obviously here it would be easier to handle it. And I started to realize that, it's an inevitable part of the market. And that kind of woke me up at that time, luckily at a young age. So yeah, I moved here 16 years ago.
Wow, yeah. So you had plenty of time to adjust. So you would have seen a lot of changes, I guess, happen in Bali in that time. You would have seen, I jokingly call it, ever since the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns ended around the world, the global refugee camp. You've seen, we've both seen like a massive increase of people from the West in the last 3 years. My prediction is that trickle is going to turn into a flood in 2026 and beyond. Actually, obviously, I'll be talking in the next episode about the Bondi massacre that's just happened in Sydney, about the amount of people that have contacted and said, that's it, I'm done with Australia. We predicted this stuff was coming. It was going to happen. There's going to be more of this. It's not random, it's coordinated attacks globally, and the West is under attack. And so I think there's a lot of reasons, not just increased violence and social division in the West, but the unaffordability. You think in places like Australia, the cost of housing. So do you see, are you seeing it like me, that you think this trickle in the last 3 years, which has really made Bali quite crowded, do you see that continuing or accelerating?
Ever since I moved here, I've heard the word bubble in real estate, which I'm in as yourself, and I've never seen it. So I always relate back to, unfortunately, there was the Bali bombing, right, which I'm sure you're familiar with the Australian monument and, everything that happened, I think now 18 years ago, or almost 20 years ago. But even with that situation, it brought more awareness to Bali. And then the year later, it had the biggest boom after that. So Bali is one of these things that I see shifting all the time in different directions. I don't see it ever stopping. And I just see different types of tourists coming with every event, let's say, like COVID, God forbid, Bali bombing, or these kinds of things. I just see different shifts along the way. But now with the way Bali is, you have a lot of international schools. And you have a lot of kids' activities and sports programs. And I've had people from America and around the world in Europe visit me and watch my son play soccer at his soccer club here, and said, wow, our soccer club isn't this nice. This is amazing that this is in Bali. So I think, you have individual owners that are putting a lot into their French restaurant, their Italian restaurant, their Australian football club, and you don't get that diversity anywhere else in the world. So I think now we're going to see a lot of homeowners and families moving here, and I haven't seen that yet. And I think now with this kind of, I agree with you, with 2026, I think it's going to be a big crash for America. I think it's going to highly affect Europe after that. I think the banks are involved in all of it, of course. And in the end, I think these families are going to wake up and realize that it's time for us to move. It's time for us to stop saying that we can make it and we can hang on and we can, they're going to take the next step of looking to Southeast Asia. And what do you have? I mean, you have Thailand, you have Vietnam, and you have Indonesia. And to be honest, Bali right now is the most accommodating to foreigners. So I see a massive rush families with money coming here in the next 2-3 years, I think. And that's going to be even better for Bali because it's going to be a more quality investor, a more quality type of individual. I'm looking forward to that. So I'm kind of gearing up for that at the moment, to be honest. That's my outlook on the situation. But I'm a positive thinker. I also like to look at the reality of things, but that's what I see coming at the moment. So, I think it's good for Bali.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I certainly see that trend accelerating, and it's true. Like we've noticed, and obviously we're familiar with, we're building a city in Marina Bay in South Lombok, and that come out of the fact that we sold out a village so rapidly that the demand of expats, but initially demand when we were developing was for holiday homes, right? People just want the holiday home, but that has changed. Excuse me, in the last 6 months. The shift to where we have to start developing residential type properties. Because people are now seriously thinking about moving here with their family. So you highlight some good things there. Bali is renowned for international schools and very good international schools. I think what was lagging in the past was the health. People had concern about the medical, but now we have an international hospital and there's more, you get some of the best clinics, whether it's in stem cells you can do here now, and a lot of anti-aging, medical tourism coming. You may have seen the president of Indonesia, I think last month, announced that he wants to make Bali a financial center on par with Singapore and Dubai, which I think is something that we've suggested as well. So, I mean, that all breeds well. Obviously, the governor come out and said they wanted to ban Airbnb or speaking at a hotel lobby last week, but the Indonesian tourism minister quickly put an end to that and said that won't be happening. So the returns are still very good. But I agree with you. I think, obviously there's a property boom for a reason in Bali because there's a boom of people moving here and the quality of people has changed. If you look back, years ago before COVID, it was particularly just tourists and a lot of Australian tourists, of course, but also from around the world. But that caliber is increasing because now it's very much an expat market. And even saying that, some people say, well, of course, Bali is becoming somewhat overcrowded, has the traffic problems. But in saying that, look at places like Uluwatu and Canggu, they may have traffic issues, but more people has led to them becoming pretty cool communities and a lot of restaurants. And it creates a vibe where I looked at Uluwatu 3 years ago when I moved here and I was like, oh, it's too quiet. There's not enough of a community there. But that's completely changed. Yeah, completely changed.
Yeah, there was
now.
nothing there. Yeah, completely nothing. And you had to drive far to get everywhere. And it was a great place to go for the weekend to a nice white sand beach. But other than that, there wasn't much there. So it is growing a lot. That is true. I agree.
Yeah, and it creates that vibe, etc. Even Lombok, you go, obviously Gili Islands, but then you go Kuta Lombok, and I see this as another, up-and-coming type Canggu. It still has the same sort of vibe that people love, I think. And I think I was just back in Australia for the first time in 6 months, and it's a great place to visit. And I'm very patriotic Australian, but I don't miss living there. I think people don't understand that when you move to a place like Indonesia, which is an expat moving economy that has a lot of opportunities. One thing I find, Justin, many Westerners underestimate what they can earn in, say, was a third world nation. I don't like to refer to Indonesia as a third world nation anymore. It's headed towards the top 4 largest economy by 2050. So certainly a very fast growing emerging economy, democratic society, not perfect, but very peaceful people. One of the world's biggest Muslim nations, which ironically is probably going to turn out to be one of the safest places to be in what's happening in the world. And one of the Westerners can understand that. Very traditional values, which a lot of us left the West because the traditional values we grew up with have disappeared, but we can see them here, family values and community values. So do you see any, as far as maybe some tips on that, what are you seeing as areas, say in Bali or in Indonesia, that you're going to see particular hotspots for property markets, or what are you seeing where people are relocating here to live or wanting to live?
I mean, I think, with Bali itself, it's a great central to what you said of what Indonesia is, right? A Muslim country. And you have a Hindu island directly smack dab in the middle of left is all Muslim, and to the right you have all Christian islands. So it's like the balance is within Bali, is kind of how I look at it. And I think Bali is a great landing spot for people that want to put their kids in school. They want to, like you said, the expat community, they want to be involved in sport activities and programs and kind of get a feel for the West. And then I think after 2 or 3 years, people living here, they start to venture out into other islands, and they don't realize that there's 15 to 17,000 islands in Indonesia, depending on the low and high tides and the seasons. And that's when people start to go, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. And then they start to look to places like Lombok and Flores and Sumba and Roti, and there's all these expanding islands. And you know, in the past, I've been in some of these government meetings where they've tried to say, okay, Lombok is going to be the next Bali and Sumba is going to be the next Bali. And in the end, it's actually not. It's kind of its own individual island. And there's a uniqueness to each island here. And I think people are going to find their ways through that and say, oh, this island's for me and that island's for me and this is why. But I think, you know, starting off in Bali and getting something kind of, I mean, at this point, you know, 1-2 era is a lot in Bali. You know, back in the day, if you said, I'm building under 10 era 10 years ago, people looked at you like you're crazy. Like, why would you build under 10 era land? And then it became 4, 5, 6 era $1 million villas. And now everybody's on, you know, 1-2 era plots. So if you get something nice and small and comfortable enough for the family, you get your kids in school, you get balance, and then you start looking into other islands. And then I think there's a great opportunity for any foreigner to make a lot of money and grow with Indonesia. The sooner the better they can get in, because I mean, again, 2-3 years, the world's coming here. So the prices are only going to go up. And, you know, I think now is the time for people to make the move. You know, it's excuse my language, but shit or get off the pot. And that's kind of the American saying. But a lot of Americans are stuck, right, in the mindset of I've worked my whole life for this house payment and these things. Luckily, I was in real estate, so it was easy for me to move at that time. But yeah, I think now is the time for people to make the move when they can and get into a great opportunity that's going to grow with these international schools and, yeah, find a good life for them and their family at this moment in time.
Yeah, I guess it raises the question. So a lot of people go, well, I'd love to move, but I've got a lot of family ties. You know, it's harder, obviously, if you have a family, to uproot and leave. I say, you know, some people say, I can't afford to relocate. I'm like, well, you probably can't afford to remain living in the West. The prices are only going to go up more and more. You're going to be like the frog put in a saucepan of cold water and slowly heated up and boiled to death. That's kind of what's happening in the West. And those things are only particularly going to get worse. So the cost of living and unaffordability crisis is only increasing. I see a lot of Europeans more urgent to relocate. I think Australians are still in a little la-la land. It's surprising how many Americans make it to Bali, the other side of the world, but there's a lot here. But Europeans in particular have seen the rapid decline, violence on the streets like London, Paris, Sweden, and Germany. So I see a lot of them relocating. But I think a lot of them go, well, what am I going to do for a living? I try and help people understand that with Western IP in the West, you have middle class Western IP you could bring to Bali or Indonesia, and you could make large amounts of money because you have the knowledge that's lacking here. I mean, the typical Indonesian doesn't have the Western IP, and they often don't have the capital. So that's the two things that we bring. So I often say to people, like, for ourselves, we could walk into pretty much any industry and do very well because we have enough knowledge of what works in the West, and we can apply that here and create more efficiency or productivity or a little bit of capital and achieve well. So I think a lot of people don't understand there's a lot more opportunity in emerging market to create wealth or fund a lifestyle than there is in the competing West. Like in Australia, 27 million people, similar IP, but it's very competitive. You can make $1 million in Australia, but if you can make $1 million in Australia, I tell people you'll make 10x in Indonesia. So what's your view on that? Do you think people who sell themselves a bit short in the West and don't realize there's tremendous opportunity, not just in real estate in Bali and Indonesia, but in pretty much any industry is open to be to be built and add businesses? Like there's that classic business by the Russian guys, Karina Massage, simply taking massage and making a McDonald's of massage. I think they've got 180 stores now and absolutely killing it. I mean, you could do that in so many industries, roll out a brand across Indonesia or Bali and profit. But I still see a lot of people haven't really caught on to that yet.
Yeah, I think Bali is definitely a place that you can't come to work for someone unless you're running a hotel or running a restaurant or running a brand that somebody's already established. And I think there is a benefit there. But I think when you come here, you definitely do need to find something that is unique. And I think there is a lot of those opportunities still. not only in Bali and Indonesia. I mean, there's foreigners that work in Jakarta. In Jakarta, they pay great money. Even the local Indonesians make, 20, 30 million a month. It's very easy for people to make money in Jakarta, and some people go between Jakarta and Bali. So, there is opportunities there. Of course, you have to get out of your comfort box, but I think in this time, in what's going on in the world, as we've discussed briefly, it's now is the time. It's like, what do? You stay in your country and you watch your bills stack up, and you see the price of peanut butter go to $15, $20 a can in the grocery store, and then what do you start doing at some point, right? You start selling your cars and going to e-bikes, or do you say, okay, now is the time to sell my property and get out and put, let's say 200, 300, half a million in the bank? What can you do in Indonesia with that? Wow. I mean, if you're willing to go to another island and not Bali, you can live a millionaire's lifestyle and have, 2, 3 servants running around you every single day, and you pay them, up to $500 a month. So you can get away with a lot, especially when you have the asset from the West. And I think that's the advantage of every Western person. They might not see it because they're chasing their bills, but they don't see right now, maybe they have equity, right? As an ex-mortgage broker myself, I always looked into the equity of the house and say, okay, you have $200,000-$300,000 in equity. There's so many possibilities that maybe you're not looking into that I can inform you on. And with that kind of money in Indonesia, you can go really far. So that's kind of the part that I like. And I think that as foreigners, they need to look at it as that, what is the option? What do I have equity? What has been my dream in my life? Sometimes when I sit with people, the first thing I talk to them about is what's their why? Why are they doing things in life? What do they want to do? What did they want to do as a child? And what could they do in Indonesia? And then that's where I think the possibilities are endless, because you can find your why here. You can grow into something, and everything's possible. And I don't see that happening anywhere else in the world right now. It's not really that possible. There's South America, other parts of Asia, but it's not as accommodating and easygoing as it is here as a foreigner. So,
yeah, I'd have to agree. I certainly looked at South America as well, to Mexico. You look at places like Costa Rica, Paraguay, etc. But I didn't feel the safety. I found safety an issue in some of those countries where you'd have to vote. Bali, probably one of the safest countries on the planet. Well, not country, but as far as an island. But Indonesia in general is incredibly safe. So yeah, well, thanks for your chat today, because I think it's very interesting, because people wanting to know this, how hard it is to relocate, and a lot of people are thinking of it, even if it's just part-time, to live part-time. But it's true that you can obviously have a job in Jakarta and fly back and forth, like it's an hour and a half flight. Many people do that in Australia, fly Sydney, Melbourne, or Brisbane, part of the week. I'm looking at living part-time in Lombok next year, another half in Bali. I mean, it's 20-minute flight, so you can easily live in 2 places as well. But when it comes to, a lot of people don't understand, yes, the arbitrage you talked about, a middle-class Australian is super rich here. My concern is that if they leave it too late, that when there's too much of a flood of foreigners, that they may have to go, look, we need to slow down the amount of foreigners that are coming, or we need to put higher requirements on as far as capital investment or whatever. Right now, they're making it quite. They've come up with that global Indonesian citizenship I saw last week. To make it easier, for many people to maintain their residency or citizenship of their native country, but also become a citizen of Indonesia. So they clearly realize they've got a benefit. A lot of foreigners coming here bring capital and bring IP and can help build Indonesia into an economic powerhouse that's destined to become. My other thing is that I feel that even if the West does face a financial crisis, which America is certainly headed that way, unless AI revolution can save America from all this debt, which I'm not too confident it will be able to make a productivity to the bottom line that's going to save it. Most companies are now saying, large companies, that they're seeing no bottom line changes from AI. It might make us somewhat more productive, but there's no bottom line changes. So it means that the likelihood of saving America through AI is not going to happen, which means the West is probably going to implode at some time in the near future. But Indonesia, instead of going through a global financial crash, could be the beneficiary of that flight of capital and flight of, IP of people moving here. And we've seen it before. Countries like New Zealand suffered a brain drain. People would flood to Australia, and Australia benefit from that. But now the West, like look, America was built by immigrants fleeing their country to America originally to build that nation. But now I think the first world is about to get a lesson, and people flee the first world for what was third world, as the first world rapidly becomes third world.
I know. Actually, my great-grandparents on the Italian side went to America and landed in Detroit, Michigan, and started in salt mines, and then went to bricklayers, and now my family lives there, so mixed Italian. But yeah, it's funny how it all shifted, huh? It's always changing. So I think comfort is the death. I think that's where we have to always keep awareness that, what is the next thing, and where is the economies going, and where should we go with those economies. Getting too comfortable and too planted, I think, can run a lot of people into issues. So yep, I think the next move is Southeast Asia, and I think people need to get on it now before they wait too late, and then they realize they shoulda, coulda, woulda. And as equity starts dropping and properties become harder to sell, even take a second mortgage or a line of credit and just make a move and see what happens. There's nothing wrong with that, right? At the end of the day. So you're not giving up, you're actually continuing on to the next venture, right? And seeing the opportunity before everybody jumps onto the bandwagon.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I always look in life, what's the worst case scenario? If you can deal with the worst case, like you might relocate, or you might go and just say, I'm going to go and live there for 2 or 3 months and get a feel for what areas I like, and make your decision. Or yeah, what's your worst case scenario? You can always go back to your own country. So yeah, but it's certainly certain psychology of people that are more comfortable, can deal with uncertainty, but they're the type of people that tend to do well in business or career because that's, they're willing to take on, get out of the comfort zone. People that really cling to the village they grew up in and aren't game to step outside their village or their city. I say everyone should leave the village and everyone should leave their country. I think it will make a better experience for them. Thanks for your time today, Justin. I appreciate your insights.
Pleasure talking with you, Jamie.
We have Justin Dallas, a expat from America that's been living in Bali for some time and successful property investor. Let's go a quick ad break and we'll be back with more in the McIntyre Report.